Welcome to the Nonfiction Writers, podcasting in a great way. I'm Ryan Aber, joined by Jason Kersey as always. And again, our special guest who just can't get enough of the podcasting, Kyle Fredrickson. Kyle, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, you guys. The football season is upon us. Does it feel good? I mean, are you guys ready?
I'm pumped.
Is summer lasted longer enough for you? Or
it has. Spent some time at the beach, spent some time at the pool, getting a little running in, but it's about time for football.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I'm ready.
Too much baseball on TV, man. I like baseball, but like when it dominates SportsCenter and it's like every single highlight is some dude making the same
catch.
There's
no such thing as too much baseball. I'm token baseball guy.
If I'm not there, I have a real hard time getting into it anymore, but that's just me.
All right, well, thank goodness we're here. It's fall time.
Yeah, but we're not here to talk about baseball. We're here to talk about football. And Big 12 Media Day is coming up Monday and Tuesday down in Dallas, Texas, and in the Big 12 doing the Oklahoman at least no favors. I'm sure some people love it, but OU and OSU both get the Tuesday slot along with Texas and Baylor and Iowa State, who maybe somebody will ask them a question at some point, I think. Right. Maybe. But there's a lot of storylines going on Tuesday. Monday, a little bit thinner. TCU is up. Kansas State is at times interesting. In West Virginia, Texas Tech, and Kansas. So certainly the scales on the 2 days lean heavily
for sure.
Toward Tuesday. But for Oklahoma, they'll bring obviously Bob Stoops is there every year. Quarterback Trevor Knight was a little bit of a surprise participant in this thing, as we still don't know who for sure who the quarterback's going to be. Linebacker Eric Stryker, wide receiver Sterling Shepard, and center Ty Darlington. Jason, just real quick, I guess from those, I would imagine the biggest shock was that Trevor Knight was going to be involved.
Yeah, I definitely think that was a surprise. I mean, Stryker, I could have probably predicted the other ones that were going to be there. The only thing that I might have added is Zach Sanchez, the winner of the first J.D. Runnels Media Cooperation Award. I would have expected him to be there, but he wasn't.
Go ahead.
But I guess when you really think about it, it's not all that surprising because Trevor Knight, regardless of his status as a starter or not, he's still a team leader. He was very much a leader throughout the SAE thing. He's a good spokesman. The thing about it that surprises me is that Bob he's always shied away from putting his quarterbacks in a position where they have to answer questions like that if they don't know that they're going to be the guy. And so he's not just subjecting him to a 10, 15-minute session with us in the red room after practice. He's putting him through a 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., virtually nonstop except an hour for lunch, and then ending with an hour-and-a-half marathon sitting there answering what will probably be the same questions over and over again because guys filter in and out. So I'd love to stand there and just count how many times somebody says, so are you even going to be the starter? Or
And I believe I get to pull that duty this year.
Yeah, well, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But
I tell you what, doesn't that just show you how much trust Bob Stoops has in him? I mean, because I think when we look at who these coaches bring out, we're thinking, oh, well, we need the stars, we need the guys with the storylines. But for the coaches, they're thinking, who are my four guys who aren't going to say something stupid, right? I mean, I would got to think that's probably their main motivation.
Yeah, I think probably so.
And it's surprising that he would bring Trevor Knight this year after not bringing Blake Bell the year before, because Bell was, with the exception of the SAE thing, which Jason mentioned, Bell was very much the team spokesman, even as through some of his ups and downs, and he just seemed like an obvious choice. He was a senior last year, had been, the great company man, making the move, and he doesn't come to Big 12 Media Day, but they bring Trevor Knight, whose status is in question as far as whether he's going to be the starter or not. I think that does show the trust that he has in Trevor, regardless of what he's answering for.
The way it was explained to me as far as Blake not coming last year, and it sort of makes sense, is that they didn't want to have Blake, or they didn't want Trevor to have to, deal with that comparison throughout that whole day, which makes sense. But you also wouldn't think that they would want him to have to. I mean, because it's not just going to be, are you going to be the starter? It's going to be, why weren't you as good as you were in the Sugar Bowl? I mean, those are the things he's going to get asked, and how he handles that. He's a sharp guy. He's a good guy. Trevor's a good guy, and he's not going to snap on anybody. You don't have to worry about him.
Right.
After the 10th time he gets asked what happened against Clemson, he's not going to pop off and cuss somebody out and, whatever. But it will be interesting to see how he handles it, because last year he handled the same questions over and over again. Now, granted, they were positive questions mostly, but he handled those really well throughout. Like, you wouldn't really have been able to tell at the end of that hour and a half that he'd been sitting there doing that for an hour and a half, And an hour and a half is a long time. I love media access. I love access to players, but that's a long time.
Yeah, it no doubt is. And, it's good to come up there and be able to chat with a guy for, 5 minutes, get a question or two in, and pop over to another player from either that same team or another team. But at the same time, when you're just camping there and listening to these guys go through it, last year I sat with Art Briles for his entire time and listened to him answer the scheduling question about 40 times, and I ask it twice in different ways, but you hear him answer the same thing over and over and over. And for players, it's got to get old doing that. But Trevor Knight, certainly, if anybody can handle it on the player side, it's Trevor Knight. Now, moving to the Cowboys, Kyle, they bring not only head coach Mike Gundy, but wide receiver David Glidden, defensive end Emmanuel Ogbah, cornerback Kevin Peterson, one of my favorite guys that I've covered in high school, and up to the point where he signed, and then linebacker Seth Jacobs. Any surprises there? Pretty much what you expected. These all guys who know how to toe the company line?
Oh, for sure. I would be lying if I would say that I'm not disappointed that Mason Rudolph's not there. But at the same time, give Mike Gundy and the PR staff their credit for making Mason available, during some of the summer stuff and in the spring. And, we have been able to talk to him quite a bit. But yeah, these are the spokesmen for the team. I mean, we're talking about Glidden, Peterson, two of the senior leaders. Ogbah, besides Rudolph, really has the most star power on the entire team, a guy who's going to get a lot of national attention this year. And Seth Jacobs, who's really been kind of a quiet guy in media settings that we've had over the past season here. But really a solid group, a little bit of a mix of everyone. I think I'm most excited just to talk to Emmanuel Ogbah, being that last year, he opens with that Florida State game. He's sacking Jameis Winston all over the place. People are asking, who is this guy? To be in someone who's kind of regarded as a potential top 10 pick next year. That's a really big leap to make in a single year. He's a real quiet, reserved kind of guy, and like you guys said, he's going to be lined up for journalists out the door asking him questions. So it'll be really interesting to see how he handles some of that media attention. But when we talk about the storylines between OU and OSU, just overwhelmingly positive questions are going to be coming to the OSU camp throughout this year. And I know for Mike Gundy, who's been in a very good mood since that Bedlam victory, it's got to be refreshing, considering last year, we were asking him about the APR penalty, the practice cuts. Obviously, that got reversed. We're asking him about Devin Thomas's status on the team after his drug charge. Who is his quarterback going to be? Is J.W. Walsh going to be the guy? I mean, there's just a laundry list of kind of hard-hitting questions that Gundy is notorious for avoiding that just aren't there this year. So I'm looking forward to it just really on that standpoint, seeing how much of that momentum has continued to carry from how they finished out the year last year. Expectations are certainly going to be high for this team.
So do we get a Mike Gundy beat writer selfie at the media day event?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he just busted out the selfie stick this time around, right? Just to get as many of his buddies as he called us in the frame next time.
That was so weird. I remember when guys started tweeting that from wherever you guys were. Was that at the practice facility?
We won't get too off topic, but we do have to address that a little bit. Well, it was one of those situations where Mike had just finished up what he said at the podium, and everyone kind of after that point gathers to him to ask questions. So we're already surrounded him. I mean, all we're separated by is a table. And he says, well, hey, let me get a picture. And he walks around the table. We're all still huddled there. And, he starts calling us by name. Kyle, come over here. Oh, come on. Hey, John Klein, over. Come on, get in the picture. Get over here. And we're thinking, well, can we say no at this point? Like, would that, he's calling us by name, which he, doesn't do a whole lot. He's, bringing us in for the picture. It was very surreal, but I appreciated it. How genuine it is, I'll let someone else decide that. But I know the players appreciated it. I know it kind of made the mood really lighten up for everybody. So it was cool. They with the selfie days they had after that, they had fans coming to the hotel, and Gundy's taking his cell phone out and taking pictures. So I can appreciate it. But yeah, that was just. After some of the press conferences that we went through last year.
I know that was what was so weird about it.
Yeah.
We'll all agree though that at no point will Bob Stoops pull that move.
Hey,
with us.
Never say never.
Let's
my
ask
friend.
him.
Never say never.
Why don't you ask him?
Hey, say, hey, Gundy's been doing this. Do you really want OSU to have the leg up on selfie game?
He wouldn't care about that.
Nope,
But anyways,
I'll let
selfies
somebody else
aside.
do that.
Selfies aside here. When we talk about OU this year, so much turnover on the coaching staff, and after the Bedlam game with the decision to repunt, what's the mood going to be? Are these guys going to be pretty optimistic?
Well, I don't. Did you want to say something?
Well, I think they're going to go back to sort of the chip on their shoulder mentality that they had a couple years ago. Now, whether it's as effective as it was a couple years ago when they finished the season with that one win that has been talked about over and over and over. But, they sort of go between those two things. And in general, during Bob Stoops' tenure there, it's been really effective when they've come in with the low expectations and, us against the world mentality. Now, I'm not sure the talent is quite there to make that kind of push, especially because of where the talent is with some of these other teams in the league, TCU and Baylor especially, and Oklahoma State. I think it's going to be really good this year. But I think they're going to be positive because all of the guys that they're bringing and a lot of the leadership on this team is very positive.
I would say, though, you talk about the talent on the team. I don't know that the talent is all that bad. Think about it. They were a pick six from beating TCU. And if they beat TCU, and then they were another pick six or kick field goal from beating Kansas State. So if they win those two games, would they have been ranked number one going into the Baylor game? Probably. I don't think they would have beat Baylor. I'm not saying they would have, but I do think that that game might not have gotten out of control the way it did. And then they don't re-kick Tyreek Hill. They're 11-1 in the regular season. Yeah. So I don't know that they're that far off talent-wise.
I don't know that they are either, except for they've got a lot of wide receivers that are unproven. Sterling Shepard is really the only guy who you can say this is what we're going to get from him week in and week out. I know they have very high expectations for D.D. Westbrook and some of the other guys coming in, and then on the secondary side, it's sort of the same thing with Zach Sanchez. You know what you're going to get from Zach Sanchez. Everybody else is some level of question mark. And if there's two areas that you cannot be deficient at in the Big 12, it's wide receiver and defensive back. And those are two big question marks for this team. So they've got a lot of talent at a lot of different places. But how will those two positions perform is a huge cloud above this team right now.
Right. And as much as OSU fans are rightfully optimistic about this season, there's still plenty of question marks in Stillwater right now. Offensive line, you got a new coach, you got a unit that just got blasted all year long. Got a lot of guys who return. And then behind him, you got Rennie Childs returning at running back, and Chris Carson, a junior college transfer who just has a ridiculous amount of hype within some of those OSU circles right now, which tends to happen. But there's a lot of intriguing storylines surrounding whether or not this team can run the ball, because of course with Mason Rudolph and that core of wide receivers they return, there's a lot to like. But as we saw last season, if the Cowboys aren't able to run the ball, things could get ugly very quick.
Yeah, no doubt about that. It'll be interesting to see how Oklahoma State responds to the momentum that they built up last year, and with some of those question marks that you said. They feel really good about their quarterback situation right now. Of course, we saw a couple years ago, let's mention it again, with Trevor Knight, how his end of the season didn't wind up translating until the next year. But certainly there's very positive signs there. Now let's get back to Media Day a little bit. We talked about Tuesday being the day of star power. Monday, though, take away the teams, and we still get a very intriguing start to the day when at 9:05 a.m. Bob Bowlesby talks. And there's no doubt that there'll be a lot of expansion talk going on during that session because of what David Boren had to say a few weeks ago when myself and a couple other beat writers huddled around him, and he basically dropped a bomb and then dropped the mic and walked off at the end of it. But it'll be an intriguing talk this year with Bob Bowlesby before Media Day begins.
You guys were just looking at me.
We're just going to stare at Jason right now. It's
yeah, it will. It will. And, he's very much he's got a very politician sort of air to him. So I think he'll, just like David Boren does, so I think that he'll know how to handle things, and he'll remain pretty patient. I think throughout. But, last year was just so I had no idea what was going to come of that question that I asked.
Let's talk about that, Jason.
Give us a refresher.
You raise your hand, you get handed a mic, and
I went into that day. I had the story, the Enterprise story for us that day, and the story was about, will the lack of a Big 12 championship game hurt the Big 12 in the playoff if there's a question about one of the leagues being left out? And so I asked that question, and then I followed it up with, because in those deals it's hard to hang on to the mic, and it's hard to ask more than one question. And so I sort of was in a situation where I had to ask two questions, and I don't like doing that normally, but so I followed that up immediately by saying, and also with this One True Champion campaign, are you eliminating co-champions? And he he didn't hear me, and he asked me to repeat it, and so I repeated it, and so he answered that one first, and basically said that we have tiebreakers, and we'll always get down to one true champion. Well, that's just flat out not true. And if I still had the mic, I might have tried to follow up on that, because I was looking at the Big 12 media guide on the page where it describes that the tiebreaker for representation, for automatic representation, but it does not break the tie for the champion. If two teams have the same record, they shall be declared co-champions. It said it right there.
As Oklahoma claims from a few years ago.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot. And you know what? It's not just the Big 12. I mean, this goes back years and years and years, decades. Several of Barry Switzer's championships were co-championships in seasons he lost to Nebraska. I mean, I realize that this isn't a new problem, but if you're going to make your damn slogan one true champion, you can't then have co-champions. It's nonsense.
Hey, I did like the commercial though, right? With the coaches' faces morphing into each other. I mean, Twitter had a ton of fun with that.
Cliff Kingsbury,
I enjoyed that part of it.
The Charlie Weiss morph was fantastic, and it was good, except for you got to the end and it one true champion. What are they doing? It's not like it was hard to foresee the disaster that was coming down the railroad tracks.
I know
at you with
everybody saw that coming. It was, and I was hoping for 4 or 5 true champions. That's what I was hoping for. Like what I'm bad at math, so I didn't actually sit down and figure it out. But what is there an easy way to figure out what the max number of co-champions could be?
Well, I mean, you could have everybody finish at 500, and it could be 10 true champions.
10, oh, God.
10 true champions.
Just the thought of that makes me so happy.
Everyone gets a medal. I like that.
But you
couldn't, because you have 9 non-conference games. So for 5 and 4, you would only have
so nobody can be 500.
So five true champions.
So 5 true champions is the.
I mean, surely there's a way you could get to 6 if somebody went winless or with 1 win, and I'll have to put the pencil to the paper on that one and try.
Well,
to
you're the guy
out.
Who always does the district scenarios
I do like
for
doing
high
the
schools.
District scenarios.
So I think you could probably crack this
I
for
can
us.
figure it out.
Although it doesn't even matter anymore, right? They got rid of didn't they get rid of co-champions for real this time?
Yeah, but it's not going to matter.
I know, but I'm just saying it's not quite as fun to go in making fun of it if they got rid of co-champions, because you just walked into that room. I just remember, like, I wasn't even going to ask that part of the question.
Yeah.
You just walk into that room and it's just everywhere. It's on the screens, it's on the banners, it's everywhere. One true champion. It's on the media guide.
I'm pretty sure we were making fun of it by the time that Bowlesby walked into the room, which is before the actual media day starts, because you'd seen it so dang much already.
And so I decided to ask, and then I thought it was funny that, after the Big 12 got left out, they brought Bowlesby on SportsCenter, and I just happened to be watching, and they read him back his response to my question about, we'll always get to the point of having a champion, and he was like, yeah, I just misspoke. It's like, how did you not know that? Like, how did you not understand how silly that was? So, you know what? I'm not even going to do it because it's going to get us way off topic, and we don't
like
have time.
going way off topic, Jason.
I mean, I'm
Go
talking
ahead.
way off topic here.
Go way off topic.
Okay,
we
well,
got time.
since we're talking about the two champions last year, I think I said this on our last podcast. I went back and listened to some of our old podcasts. Do you remember the one when you and I argued for like 30 minutes about TCU and Baylor?
Oh, no.
Yes.
Because I didn't realize how long we went. Like, we talked for
Yes.
like 15 minutes about OU or something, and then it was like 17-minute mark. You bring it up, or one of us brings it up, and it went on for like 20 minutes.
Jeez.
And you're still wrong. Even
You're
though
still
TCU won the bowl game and Baylor lost the bowl game, you're still
no,
wrong.
I'm right.
Bless you,
You're
OU
still
fans who listen to all of that. Just, I'm just going to give you a pat on the back.
I wonder how many people actually sat and listened to that whole thing.
Most people are like, yeah, they're
Click.
talking about TCU Baylor. Stop. But we had fun with it. I was right. We had fun with it.
Well, I mean, I guess you just don't think head-to-head matters, so you just don't think they should play the games.
Again, Baylor's loss was worse.
I'm not sure which
TCU
rivalry
lost
I
to a
like
better
better.
team.
I don't know if I like the Ryan and Jason rivalry or the Jason and Bob Bowlesby one. I think we should do celebrity boxing for each, though,
Yeah.
just so we can determine one true
Speaking of celebrity
champion.
boxing, do you remember last year when the fan on Twitter
Yes.
challenged me to a celebrity boxing
Hey.
match? Because he was
And
mad
we
at
were
something I
supposed to have
tweeted.
him on the podcast at some point.
I need to go back and find that tweet, and
Yes, you do.
that'd be kind of fun. Because by the time we went back and forth a little bit, I could tell he was having fun with it. So that would be kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be absolutely
It was
fantastic.
the
We need
morning after they lost to TCU. Somebody
to- 'cause
challenged me to a boxing
we come
match.
back for media day, and then we've got virtually 2 weeks of dead air. We got to figure out something to talk about. Maybe we could have him on.
Yeah, have that guy on.
Gotcha.
Or maybe we could just have one where we re-debate the TCU Baylor thing, and I
And how
continue
I
to
was
show how you're
right.
wrong.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Well, to redirect you guys here real quick.
Can we go
We
on
were-
for 20
since-
more
since-
minutes?
Hey,
So-
I told you guys I wasn't even going to say it. I started to
Hey.
and I stopped.
Hey, we like going way off topic on this.
Well, now
podcast,
that we're on the playoff conversation and we're heading into Big 12 media days, I think a good question to ask is, what are the percentage chances that we see a Big 12 representative this year, based on, not only on the talent we have in the league this year, but like the issue it's going to be at hand, and until there's possible expansion, some of the not having a championship game, how that affects it. I mean, do you guys think that this is a year where one of those top 4 teams, whether we're talking about TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, could somehow slither their way in there?
I think they've got to be undefeated. I think TCU probably has the best chance for that to happen. But I think the way that everything lines out is that the Big 12 either has to go undefeated or have one less loss than any of the other 4 power conferences, just because they have that game at the end of the season, for better or worse. And you can talk about round robins and all that, but they have that showcase game. I mean, last year we didn't think much of Ohio State at all until that Big Ten championship game when they absolutely laid it on Wisconsin. They had that showcase.
Right.
TCU and Baylor didn't, and look what happens. They get left out. So I think they've got to go undefeated. I think TCU has a pretty good chance of that happening. But in this league, when you've got Baylor, OSU, and OU, I think I picked those 4 teams. I went TCU, Baylor, OSU, OU in my breakdown.
We're probably all the same on that, right? I mean, that's what I
TCU, Baylor, OSU, OU.
Right.
Yeah, that was my doubt. Yeah, that was
so
my order.
all three of us go the same top four. I think all four of those have potential to break through. And, of course, last year we didn't know what TCU was going to be. We didn't think Trevon Boykin was going to be near what he wound up being. But I think knowing what we know now about Boykin, knowing what we know now about TCU's defense is pretty good. That they've got the best shot, but they have to go undefeated. And for better or worse, Baylor is not going to get any favors from the committee because of their scheduling. And it's not going to change.
I think, I agree with you, Ryan, that I think they're going to have to go undefeated, because if they don't go undefeated, then they're going to open themselves up to all of those things that you talked about. And I would even say, let's say, I'm just naming teams here, but let's say Oregon has one loss or is undefeated, and I don't know, Florida State or Clemson or one of them has one loss as well. And then Alabama or Auburn or LSU or one of those teams or Georgia has 2 losses. And then the Big 12 team has 1 loss. I would say even in that scenario, I could see the Big 12 getting left out, because the SEC, of the power of the SEC brand, everybody wants to see the SEC in it. Everybody assumes they're the best conference. I mean, I think they, well, I don't know. I think they probably still are the best
up for debate
conference
this year, but I think early, yeah.
So now, let's just say it's OU, or I mean, I'll just say TCU has 1 loss, and they're sitting right there on the edge. Oregon wins the Pac-12 championship game and goes in with 1 loss or undefeated. Clemson, same deal, or Florida State, same deal. And then you have Alabama and Georgia play in the SEC championship game, both with 2 losses. And one of those teams wins by 2 touchdowns. You really going to, I'm leaving out the Big Ten. There would have to be a third team. So Ohio State, I'm just going to throw them in. I'm going to assume that they're going to be in. So then you can't throw any of those 3 out. It comes down to 1 loss TCU that didn't play a 12th game, or Alabama or Georgia, or Auburn. I bet there'd be a good chance.
These are the questions that Bowlesby's going to have to kind of answer to, because you're right. Of
course, you can't sit there and explain.
Well, right.
All right, Bob. So
let's get him on the podcast.
Let me line out this scenario for you here, okay? No, but in that scenario, I think the SEC might get in over the Big 12, and I think it might be the right call. Honestly, it depends on, obviously there's a lot of the factors, but if TCU has a bad loss, or
I mean, to me, the Big 12 team has got to go undefeated to feel confident in themselves getting in the 14 playoff.
Yeah,
just the reality of things right now.
Yeah. But even playoff talk aside, though, I mean, the Big 12, having TCU and Baylor up there, I think it's still top-heavy, obviously, with Kansas and Iowa State weighing kind of in the background. Talent-wise, you figure they have a team that could compete to get there, though.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that they've got teams that have the potential to get there, but it's going to be awfully tough for them. They're not going to get any benefit of the doubt in this outcome. And you mentioned Kansas to get on the complete other track. Is there a chance that Kansas winds up being the worst team, maybe not only in Big 12 history, but we could be talking about Power 5 conference history with how they are this year?
When you said, speaking of Kansas or something, I was like, you're not putting them in anything, are you?
No.
Okay, I'm just making sure. I mean, you do have dumb opinions sometimes.
I do, but not on this topic.
But changing gears a little bit here too, among all, because what's great about this event is we get to talk with coaches from across the Big 12 and players across the Big 12 we wouldn't get so much access to. Is there one player or one coach that you guys are most looking forward to talking to?
I'm interested in Cliff Kingsbury because of the Baker Mayfield stuff.
Right.
Another question that Jason asked last year.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how much he'll say, but that's interesting to me. I know Bill Snyder isn't exactly the most forthcoming guy, but I've always found him to be pretty good when you ask him something, different. I've asked him some things that he's given pretty good answers to, so he's sort of an interesting guy to talk to. I wouldn't probably want to cover a team that he's the head coach of, but But he's sort of interesting. Gary Patterson can be really interesting.
Yeah.
Dana Holgerson can be interesting.
Always.
And obviously won't get a chance to be around Art Briles much this year, but he's nothing but interesting when you get a chance to sit down and talk to him for, like I said, I spent the whole hour and a half around him last year and seeing the different ways that he answered the scheduling questions, the questions about the Big 12 and everything like that. Agree or disagree, he's entertaining.
Yeah.
And Paul Rhodes is great.
I was just going to say that. Paul Rhodes isn't going to be a guy who's going to have a ton of media members, flocking to his table, but he's a super honest guy. I mean, obviously a real passionate coach. And when you're the head coach of a program like Iowa State, I mean, that's the way you should deal with the media, I think. Being very forthcoming and a good personality.
They have two players coming that have the same name, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, Sam Richardson.
Yeah.
Paul Rhodes is interesting, and it's sad that they've sort of had these last couple of years where they've been the way they've been, because you felt for a little while like he was building something up.
After that win in Ames over OSU.
Well, before that, when they beat Nebraska, and he does those "I'm so proud of you" speeches. I mean, it's just hard not to like a guy like that, and you kind of would like to see them take the next step, but it's just so hard. You just wonder, are they ever going to be able to? In a conference where they have to play Oklahoma, they have to play Texas, they have to play TCU, they have to play Baylor now. However, who would have thought that Baylor and TCU were going to come around? So, I mean, maybe it's possible, but those teams are in Texas, not in Iowa. So,
a little bit easier to recruit to Waco and Fort Worth than Ames.
Yeah, I like Ames. But
I like Ames too. I really liked. Got to go there twice last year and really enjoyed it both times. But
I would he's always really good, and in Paul Rhodes, Iowa State has a guy who's probably, if he gets things turned around, I don't think you have to worry so much about him bolting for something else. And I hope they continue to give him a chance to.
And if he does, they've got a pretty good assistant there who I know you're very familiar with.
I was waiting for you to say something about that.
You knew it was going to happen.
Oh, his boy Mangino? Is that what?
Mangino is my boy. Right. He's my boy. I'll say it publicly. I'll scream it from the rooftops.
Oh gosh.
Mangino's my boy. So. I wish he was coming to Big 12 Media Days, but he's not. So.
Yeah. It was interesting. I know last year, Charlie Strong was the hot ticket at Big 12 Media Days.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
The amount of media around him. It's going to be interesting to see the crowd around Trevon Boykman this year. Being a Heisman candidate.
Yeah.
I think he's one of maybe two or three quarterbacks who's even coming to the whole thing, right? I know a lot of these temes don't even bring
Sam
those
Richardson, and Trevor Knight, I think, are the only ones.
To see how he interacts with the media, I've never talked to him, since I've been on this beat. But I think it'll be interesting to see how he handles some of those questions and just to see how much attention he gets.
So, do we think that Trevon Boykin is going to be the star of day one of Media Day?
I would. Oh, that's safe to say. Other than Kersey's boy Bowlesby, other than him, I think he's got the most star power.
And Cliff always draws the crowd for better or worse. I think Boykin though is going to be the guy. Now, day two is much more interesting with all the star power: Baylor, OU, OSU, Texas, and then Iowa State thrown in on that. But the star has got to be, I think, Sean Oakman for everything that came out about him this summer. There's the way he looks, the stuff he does in the weight room,
the thousands of internet memes with that picture of him looking absolutely terrifying.
Yes. Yeah, that would be interesting.
I think he's got to be the star of it because Texas doesn't have. I mean, Charlie Strong is. Obviously a very strong character as well, but they don't have that player.
Right.
Jonathan Gray isn't that kind of doesn't have that kind of forceful impact. But Oakman is certainly going to draw a crowd on Tuesday, regardless of how much star power there is on that day.
Well, let's shift gears. I want to know. So we're previewing Big 12 Media Days here. Who did you guys vote for Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and Newcomer of the Year in your preseason ballots?
I had Offensive Player of the Year was really easy, Trevon Boykin.
Mm-hmm.
Defensive Player of the Year, I went with Emmanuel Ogbah from OSU. I think, like you said, just tons of potential. Could be a top 10 draft pick this year. I think he's got that potential to be that kind of impact player for them. And then I went with D.D. Westbrook from Oklahoma. I think he's got a chance to be a really big addition, not only playing beside Sterling Shepard and giving OU a secondary wide receiver target, but also in return coverage or the return game where they struggled so much last year. Yeah. He's got a chance to be a difference maker there, which is something OU has had pretty consistently. They didn't have it all last year, and they really missed that.
Kyle?
The same thing. I hate to be the guy who has the same one, but I'll be honest with Westbrook. Westbrook was a bit of a cop-out. I don't necessarily know who all the newcomers are in the Big 12, but when you talk about a need a team has and the hype that goes behind kind of what he brings into Norman, I think it's a bit of a no-brainer. With Agba, I'm not so sure. I would put him at the top there, but I think some of his success last year stemmed from the fact that people didn't know who this guy was. I don't know that teams were necessarily game planning for Emmanuel Agba. Not going to be the case this year with how he's broken out. And obviously Boykin at the top. He's I think right now the Vegas odds-on leader for the Heisman. So we're talking about an all-world
Boykin was the
guy.
one I could get out a pen and just write it in and feel really good about. The other two, it took some thought and had to decide which way I was going.
I wonder if anyone else got any votes for Offensive Player of the Year. Can you think of anybody else who could even make the argument?
Surely somebody who covers Texas voted for some Texas player. And I love a lot of the Texas beat writers that I know, but there's those radio guys and the sort of fringe guys. And it seems like Texas always gets a really high vote.
Well, I mean, Samaje Perine,
I think you could make the case.
Maybe make a case.
Yeah.
Maybe make the case for him. But Boykin is clear at the top. Yeah. My votes were Boykin, obviously, and for reasons you guys stated. Newcomer, I also went with D.D. Westbrook. My Defensive Player of the Year, though, was Sean Oakman.
Right.
I just think he's just a freak.
Can we get him and Agba to line up and go at each other at media days or something? Have some kind of competition.
That would only be the most fantastic thing ever. That would.
Why don't you set that up? Go tell one of them that somebody said something about him, and we'll just let you do it all. And then when they find out that you lied, then you can.
I was gonna say this is gonna end up me getting pummeled by two future first round draft picks. I'm not so sure.
Hey, I'll be there to get video of it. It'll get huge hits on newsok.com.
Listen, we're all about clicks in this business, and if I can get us some clicks,
that would get clicks. Mike Gundy would probably click on it a lot.
Clicks and stitches for me. That's how it would go.
I bet Agba wouldn't get suspended for that.
All right, we've gone off track far enough, but that's all the time we have for today. You can check us out every day at newsok.com and every morning in the Oklahoman for the best OU and OSU coverage anywhere.